I've already ranked the 10 best and worst bosses in the Souls series on this channel, but to start off 2025, I thought it would be fun to rank my 10 favourite boss fights across all of gaming. Much of this list will include bosses from FromSoft's catalogue, since they create such incredible fights. To prevent pretty much this whole ranking being taken up by Souls bosses, and to keep it varied and interesting, only a single boss will be included from any one game. With that said, let's dive into the most riveting challenges gaming has to offer. The Chompy Mage is probably the first boss I was ever truly taken by. Skylanders Giants was one of the first games I ever played, and Chompy Mage is my favourite challenge in said game. Granted, he isn't a particularly difficult challenge, the gameplay is simple and not the most complex, but it is far more engaging than most Skylanders bosses thanks to the realm flipping mechanic. That simple gameplay is ultimately why Chompy Mage takes the bottom spot on this list, but he's still one of my favourites. The Chompies are the most iconic and beloved of Skylanders enemies. Well, maybe aside from Bill nowadays. The Chompy Mage is just a boss which takes the form of a big chubby chompy. He's got style, he's got character, he's got quips, what's not to love? Unfortunately, mere solid gameplay isn't enough to climb higher on the list when all the competition provides absolutely phenomenal combat. I am planning to do a blasphemous boss ranking on this channel at some point, so this does unfortunately spoil the top spot of that list, but I couldn't not include Ophidior on this list. His design really is akin to a From Software boss, with clever visual and environmental storytelling through his moveset. Many blasphemous bosses feel the need to have dialogue cryptically exposing some of their lore, but Ophidior just doesn't need it. His entire story is communicated simply in the progression of the fight, which both narratively and mechanically is incredible. He easily has the best gameplay in a blasphemous boss. Every move feels deliberate and has an incredibly clear tell encounter, but working together, they create a demanding process of precise reactions. What I love about this boss is that it's approachable with absolutely any playstyle, whether you want to use parries with Rugo al Alba, or rely purely on great positioning using Veredicto, it's always a brilliant boss, one definitely deserving of its flowers in my top 10 bosses in gaming history. Death's Door is a game I really haven't seen anyone talking about. I haven't played It Takes Two, but I've watched my friends play it, and I can't imagine it deserved Game of the Year over the near masterpiece that this game was. But due to how underrated it is, nobody knows about the phenomenal boss that is the Grey Crow. Most of Death's Door's bosses fall somewhere between mediocre and good, but this one in particular goes so far beyond. Visually, it has one of the most standout identities of any boss I've ever encountered, with a beautiful white canvas that feels like you're suspended in the timeless abyss of the afterlife, accentuated by the monotone blacks and greys of death itself. It's just gorgeous. His gameplay is similarly great, and while I don't think it's as close to perfect as that of Ophidior, it's still more than good enough to be on this list. Every move he has feels fair and avoidable in every situation, an absolute must to be considered among the best. The cherry on this incredible colourless cake is the sprinkles of narrative quality. The Grey Crow was your closest ally throughout the game, and you reach the climax of your journey, the moment you've been working towards for the past 10 hours, only to be betrayed and forced into a fatal confrontation with the Crow, forced to put him down in a depressing battle in line with Dark Souls' Sith. The Grey Crow is a fantastic boss, and one that absolutely deserves the praise he never receives. Many will argue Romeo is the best boss in Lies of P, but for me it has to be the Nameless Puppet. He's undoubtedly the hardest boss in the game, only falling behind Melania and Radahn in terms of difficulty. His moveset is incredible, making use of all the strengths of the game's combat system, and allowing for both dodging and deflecting to be integrated into your approach to the fight. His design is as great as all the other enemies in Lies of P, and he has that touch of visual flair that makes it such an incredible Souls-like. The arena is fitting, his story is the climax of Geppetto and P's arc throughout the game, and that narrative told within holds its share of twists and moments of payoff that make the fight itself just so much stronger as a result. The Nameless Puppet really does excel in all areas, but he just isn't quite as perfect as the bosses higher on the list. Mesmer is the poster child for the best DLC in Souls, and FromSoft definitely chose the best boss to represent it. Mesmer excels in all areas, Fantastic gameplay, compelling lore, gripping visual design, it all comes together to create Elden Ring's best boss fight. His opening cutscene is chilling and enthralling, as is the fight itself, with blinding speed that requires incredibly swift reactions and precise movements. Every move has flame after effects that punish sloppy dodging and keep the player on their toes for the entire encounter. His second phase is just as strong, the snakes having frenzied hitboxes, but none of the jank of the snakes from Bloodborne's Shadows of Yharnam. He is one of the hardest bosses in Souls, and it all feels incredibly fair and earned. Messmer is the high point of Shadow of the Erdtree, and definitely deserves to be ranked among the best. The Howling Aces is easily the best thing to come from Cuphead's delicious Last Course DLC, and I'm always looking for new ways to approach the fight so I can experience it again. Phase 1 is my favourite of any boss in the game. It's so well balanced, with importance placed on positioning due to the tennis balls and ample opportunities to perform parries. The second phase has many of the same strengths, and from here a secret final phase can even be activated. The standard final phase doesn't disappoint either, with varying but fair laser patterns and the insane mechanic of your screen being flipped around. I also love the way you control your platform of the plane, and I would take this over a real plane level any day. I'm confident in saying it is the greatest fight in Cuphead, a game known for its great bosses. Artorias has some of my favourite lore and build-up of any Souls boss. It's unsurprising given he had an entire DLC centred around him, but Artorias really does take it to another level. His design is incredible, the broken arm being a mark of From's environmental storytelling. While Dark Souls 1 is incredibly clunky and not nearly as refined as newer Souls games, it's really hard to see that in this boss. Artorias has combat that feels more akin to that of DS3 than his own game, and it's just as highly perfected as the bosses from the third game in the trilogy. I consider every move he possesses to be extremely well balanced, challenging and fair, a balance the first Dark Souls sometimes struggles to meet. The only thing holding Artorias back from the top tier of this list is his dated design, with some hitboxes, movements and interactions showing the age of Dark Souls 1. For the time he was made, Artorias was an absolutely monumental achievement in boss design, likely my favourite released in any game at that point. Unfortunately, FromSoft are masters at learning from their past experiences and improving on them in later iterations, and while Artorias still holds up, he doesn't quite have the level of perfection claimed by the bosses in the top 3. In my opinion, Lady Maria is the height of Bloodborne. She truly perfected the fast-paced and aggressive combat of Bloodborne with her nimble moveset. I do wish she had more posture in the first phase so you couldn't stun lock her, but it isn't a detriment to my enjoyment of the fight. Maria's attacks are all nearly perfectly designed, and I'm a sucker for cool bosses with dual swords. Her usage of Bloodflame is one of the coolest aesthetics in Bloodborne, and on top of that, they're all mechanically engaging and create an incredible flow to her fight. As with all bosses in the top 10, her visual and environmental storytelling is unparalleled by anyone besides FromSoft, with her sins being hinted at throughout the preceding level and her desperation to hide them from you as she descends into the use of blood arts, highlighting her tragic yet haunting lore. This is anchored in the soundtrack, which is one of my favourites in a game with one of my favourite OSTs of all time. Lady Maria is an unbelievable step up from most of Bloodborne's bosses, and is completely deserving of her spot on this list. Sword Saint Ishin is the best boss in Sekiro, the best final boss in the Souls series, and the second best boss in all of Soulsborne. Ishin is a nearly flawless encounter in terms of his combat, and his presentation isn't far off. The arena is incredible, reminiscent of German's, and gets even better with the lightning in Phase 3. This is one of the hardest bosses in the series, having 4 whole phases, with the 3 after Genichiro all being more challenging than anything in the game before them. Prior to Elden Ring, I would say Ishin is the hardest boss in Soulsborne. I do like the brief fight with Genichiro to kick off the battle, as it creates a nice circular structure that demonstrates the player's growth and skill throughout the game. I honestly have nothing bad to say about Ishin's moveset. It really is perfect. Sekiro makes a battle like this possible thanks to the greatest video game combat ever. My only minor issue with the fight is that the player can fall off the cliff to their death, and I never enjoy when gravity becomes the primary threat in these games. Blighttown, the Gutter, and the Depraved Chasm are all examples of gravity just sucking the fun out of an experience. Thankfully, in Ishin's encounter it is very avoidable, and leaves a barely noticeable stain on a pretty much perfect boss that's only topped by one other. In my eyes, Gale is the pinnacle of the Souls series, and I know I'm not alone. There are so many videos ranking the best bosses in Souls, and the vast majority have Gale in the top 10, most with him occupying the top spot. It's easy to see why. He has all the elements of an incredible boss. His combat takes advantage of all the strengths of DS3, and evolves as the fight goes on, telling his story and his movements. His score has grown to be one of my favourites in the series over the years, and the visual design is impeccable. Phase 3 is definitely my favourite, his flaming red cloak contrasting with the furious blue lightning as you duel at the end of time after all else has fallen to rot. He has possibly my favourite cutscene in any of these games, and one of the best quotes in "Is this the blood of the dark soul?" Gale doesn't fall short in a single area. He's perfect in every aspect, and I take no shame in echoing the sentiment everyone else has shared, that Slave Knight Gale is FromSoft's magnum opus, and the single greatest video game boss I have ever experienced. Those were my 10 favourite bosses across all of gaming. Obviously half the list was from the Souls series, but I'm glad I got to shine some light on some other incredible challenges, which don't always get the love they deserve. Next time on the channel, we'll be diving into the opposite end of the quality spectrum, and going over the 10 worst bosses I've ever had the displeasure of facing. I hope you enjoyed, and will stick around for the next video.